My goal in life has been to always make enough money so that I can pay someone else to do my math for me.
Oh yeah.
I'm a writer, man. I just different side of my brain. I like bow down to my accountant. I'm like, how do you do that?
Excel spreadsheets. Yeah, it's not as fun as going out and reporting though. Cool. We're really happy to be joined by Matt Laslo. So Matt Laslo has been doing a lot of really important work recently on the UFO subject, and he's been really like getting to the bottom of what's going on in Congress and really, holding our elected officials accountable and getting their thoughts on what's going on with this subject. So he spent most of his career in politics, and he's written for many magazines, including Rolling Stone, Wired, The Atlantic. He's also worked for public radio and written a lot of articles on that side and lectures at universities about journalism, including at University of Maryland and Johns Hopkins. And now Matt is spending a lot of time working independently. His project Ask a Paul is like an on the ground journalism effort where he's going to the Capitol and asking politicians directly what they think of various things, not just UFO, but like cryptocurrency, AI, politics, all the sort of things that are going on in these crazy times. And as I understand, you're like a relative newcomer to the UFO UAP space in the last couple of years. Yeah, and just like many of us are, so I'm going to be asking some questions on how you got there. But I think thanks for joining us, Matt.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
You forgot that I was also a Playboy contributor, which I was only just reminded of because one of our Ask a Poll websites was listed as porn because I was a Playboy contributor. I'm like, the articles.
Yeah, so he's dipping his toes all over the place. And he's been at this since basically 2006, if I got the years correctly. So I guess I wanted to start off. We'll get to UFOs and all that in a sec, but just how did you get started in journalism? Like, did you grow up knowing that you wanted to be a journalist?
That's a loaded question. Because yes, I am now professor at Johns Hopkins and Boston University and some other schools. But like I was a pothead at 15, ran away from Chicago, hopped a Greyhound bus to Santa Cruz, California, then got back to Chicago. Like, family rescued me, and then I was a bad boy, so I got shipped off to boarding school. Once I got done with boarding school, then I became a raging cokehead. So then I was homeless by the time I was 19.
Whoa.
And then the heavens parted and I found the Lord. And so I, got heavy into evangelicalism and religion and all that. Did my undergrad actually in MTG's district down in North Georgia at Covenant College. So the first time I met Marjorie Taylor Greene, I was like, hey, ma'am, this was 2 decades ago. I'd be your constituent and I'd be giving sermons. But as I told Josh Hawley, then I saw the light and it was dark. But then I studied philosophy in my undergrad, at a conservative Christian school. Like the professors were fairly open-minded, but the student body was just like raging conservative, small-minded, biblical worldview constraining what we were learning from these brilliant philosophers. So I kind of got disillusioned with religion and then kind of like hated a lot of what I did because I went to Uganda and gave sermons, went to inner city of Chicago and gave sermons when I was young and I really should have been listening more than, preaching to folks. So yeah, once I think it was my junior year, I was RA my sophomore year, and a lot of students on my hall were part of the student newspaper. Mm-hmm. And I was really rethinking everything. And they're like, dude, stop bitching. Just write it down. So I started doing some pieces for the school newspaper and then just got hooked. So now I'm a hopeless journalism junkie as opposed to just a normal junkie.
Yeah, I mean, it's great for society that you transition to the junkiness to, getting the information out there. So I guess it sort of started off as kind of Did you like do more investigative journalism, or was it more from like a preachy kind of opinion pieces side that you started?
So initially it was, just kind of like dumb op-eds, but then I quickly, because I spent a semester, like I almost dropped out of the undergrad just because, again, the conservative, and like I'm fine with conservatives, but just like at that school, there's this rabid religiosity amongst the student body that just made me want to like flee. But my sister was actually living in Camden, New Jersey, in a house owned by a Catholic church there, where they were, working with the local prostitutes, the local school kids. They like set up a greenhouse, and then like set up a huge community garden, and so like 5 blocks away from Superfund sites. And so it was literally like teaching them how to reclaim the land and all that. And so I was kind of like, oh, this hippie liberal evangelicalism, I'm like kind of into that, even though I'm like kind of over God. And so I was studying at Eastern University on the main line for a semester. And I started writing I started covering town council and school board meetings for the News of Delaware County, 25
Right.
bucks a pop. And then I kind of leveraged that into working for the Metro. It's this free daily they have in Philly, but it's like the most read paper in the world, I believe. It's started in Stockholm, Sweden, but you're in Paris or Beijing, there's stacks of these green metros by the subways. And so I started covering entertainment for them. And so like I still do a little bit of music coverage. But I guess that side of me comes out in my drug coverage.
Right.
For Vice News Tonight, Rolling Stone, all the fun ones. But yeah, with the UAP topic, I'm also a Wired magazine contributor. And this issue actually got on my lap. If you remember, it was like start of 2023, US airspace was invaded by a balloon.
Yeah,
And
there's
I'm like,
shoot downs.
right. But I'm like, wait, we drop like $1 trillion a year on our military, and we don't even know what's in American airspace. And we allow this balloon to like traverse the whole country. It was just like pathetic. And like, because Americans were freaking out, then Congress freaked out. So they had like a couple of classified briefings real quick. And
Right.
as you were saying,
you were like on the Hill during that whole,
yep.
like situation. Then.
And as you were saying, after that first balloon went from over Alaska to South Carolina, where it was finally shot down, everyone kind of forgets this, but like in a span of about like 3 days, the Air Force shot down 3 other objects hovering over Alaska, Michigan. The Air Force did not stop shooting down objects that were unknown because those objects went away. They stopped shooting them down because the public freaked out, and everyone was like, "Wait, what is this?"
Yeah, that was like that was kind of your entrance into the whole UAP topic.
Well, so I had been covering that just because, again, Congress was so freaked out, and so
and it was just such
they had all these
national news story. Everyone was like, "Are we going to war? What's going on?" Or it was like, and then like 2 weeks later, everyone forgot about it.
Exactly. But that's where David Grusch, this former intelligence officer in the U.S. government, he dropped his bombshell because I think
that was around April or May,
was like January, February, so around May or whatever. His stuff came out. Like I'm a professor, I'm a congressional junkie. Like everyone in journalism, in political journalism, the goal is to cover the White House. I'm like, no. I've read the Constitution. The power is with the people, even though it's rowdy and crazy. Like, I'd rather be with Congress because they have actual power. They just don't use it, and they give it to the White House. Both parties, over the years. And so, David Grusch, that whistleblower, he had 2 claims. One was that the U.S. government has recovered craft and biologics. I'm like, cool. That's either provable or disprovable. They're either there or they're not. So like, cool. Some other, New York Times can have that one. But his second claim was that there are these hidden SAPs or special access programs within the executive branch that are hidden from Congress, even though the funding comes from Congress. And that was something that I was like, wait, he's literally holding a mirror up to Congress and saying, and they still haven't done it yet, but saying, hey, prove me wrong. And if you don't prove me wrong, you are completely derelict of your constitutional duty. And again, to this day, Congress has not proven David Grusch wrong.
And it's
that I
really
know.
Fascinating. And on one hand, it's like, how can you not be able to like verify these things, but also like they have so much on their plate, and it's also like on one hand, this topic feels like it's so important, but it's also like kind of not affecting anything directly. So it's in this like weird limbo where, and I'm like, like curious to hear your thoughts on that.
To a degree, and this is where some people get frustrated with me because I'll use the term drone, and they're like, wait, are you talking about drones or are you talking about UAPs? Like here in Washington, drone is synonymous with UAP, which is synonymous with UFO. And so at the end of last year, when we had the incursions over the Northeast, mostly over Jersey, you had people just really freaked out by that. And so you had this public hearing in the House of Representatives, and it was the Homeland Security Committee, and they had the FBI in there, they had DOJ, and they had Border Patrol in there. Under oath, they all testified that, hey, we have no idea what these objects flying over. And in Jersey, they were flying over munitions depots. Like, where are bombs and all the weapons of war? Love or hate them, that's where they're made. And so they were surveilling that. They were also surveilling, there's two different military munitions depots, I believe. And then the now President Trump's golf course. Like, sorry, he's the president and he's a former president, so he gets Secret Service detail, and any property or whatever that he owns needs to be secured. And
especially given like the sort of political violence that's been going on, and like the fact that they're completely unresponsive to. Or I'm sure there's some more going on behind the scenes, and I'm like, I guess I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Like, what was the energy in the room like around December or late November when this stuff was happening? Because you were also in the room like around February 2023, like during those shootdowns, and later in like December 2023, like a year before this current lap, there was like the Langley incursions. Like, has the energy kind of been like increasing around this, or has it kind of gone back and forth with respect to all these like huge incidents?
So yes and no. And I think some of the dynamics have gotten a little political. Like, kind of the refreshing thing for the last 2 years before Trump took office again this year, it was refreshing because this was kind of like the last issue that was nonpartisan, like this and Canada's policy. Like 70% of Republicans love to smoke weed. Like, it's a non-issue except on Capitol Hill, where they won't act on it. And so this stayed pretty non-political. But now that we have this new secrets task force in the House, where the Congressional UAP caucus basically had their portfolio expanded, and I kind of think, I don't have this confirmed, but it's kind of my gut suspicion, both my professor's side and after being a reporter for 20 years here, it kind of feels like Republican leadership is jamming these folks on the UAP caucus. I mean, because think about it. They go from just having this huge issue of UAPs and a potential 70-year government cover-up, et cetera. Well, then, instead of just getting resources and their own select committee where they'd be able to subpoena folks and actually hire a staff, instead of that, they got a task force, which only has a 6-month window. Like just last week at Ask a Poll, we broke the news that it looks like they're getting an extension. Chairwoman Luna has been promised a 6-month extension to it. Well, like, most of what they've been doing this year is looking into like JFK, MLK, Epstein. Underneath their purview is also COVID origins and what really happened on 9/11. Was it an inside job? Like,
it's just like they're kind of flooding the zone, I guess.
Flooding the zone, but like, they're literally now tasked with the craziest of crazy conspiracies And so I don't think leadership thinks that these folks are going to solve any of these. I think, as Senator Mike Rounds, a Republican of South Dakota, former governor out there, as he told me, he's like, good, keep them busy. That's what we want.
Mike Rounds said that?
Mike Rounds said that.
He was like sponsored that Schumer-Rounds legislation was like landmark. It failed 2 times.
Yep.
So he was sort of like, can you speak more on that? So was his attitude kind of positive towards these, or is he like supportive of it, or it's more?
He was laughing in their faces. It was, in his defense, it was his first time hearing about the Secrets Task Force, which again, it's like how much weight they actually have. Not much if people on the other side of your office building over in the Senate don't even hear about what you're doing. And so like I've slowly been alerting senators. That's kind of what I do at Ask a Poll. I like break news individually to lawmakers. So like that whistleblower David Grusch, he's now been hired by
by Burlington,
Congressman Burleson in the House, which the Senate, even though they've like looked into Grusch's claims, they had no idea he's now been hired. And so it was kind of in that context that I was alerting Rounds like, hey, have you heard of the Secrets Task Force? He's like, no. I kind of described it, and he's like, interesting. And like kind of rolled his eyes, was laughing, but like, no. They've been set up to kind of be a laughing stock. Now, they would disagree with that. But
and is that kind of like the attitude? Because I know like Mike Rounds has like received, briefings with, he's like pretty on the UFO topic, and there's some, he kind of gets read into some things and has been setting up meetings. But like, I guess, is the attitude in general like towards this task force? Are people like supportive of it, or are they kind of just like, whatever, we got other stuff to worry about?
Yeah, I mean, so nothing the task force is working on like percolated to the surface in like Trump's first 100 days now, like what, 130, whatever days. So like none of their issues kind of ever will, it seems. So they're literally just kind of kept busy in this little box. They're like, told you're in a chair, like you have power. No, you don't have power. You have a fake gavel because you have a task force with a 6-month lifespan. And so, you got another 6-month lifespan. Well, guess what? Seems like leadership's probably going to want to kill it once the election year starts next year. So like they're on a really tight leash. But also you bring these issues up to any members of Congress, right, left, and center. Like it's just laughable that one committee, like hell, we had committees just focused on JFK
for like years.
Like, yeah, exactly. So like, what the heck are they going to do that hasn't been done? And like, in their defense, they are dialoguing with the ODNI, Tulsi Gabbard, her office, but she's the director of national intelligence. So like, we broke the news. I don't know much about the JFK stuff, but I guess they uncovered 6 or maybe 3 or 6 new boxes of this one former Secret Service agent's claims, or maybe FBI agent who was based in Miami. They found like 3 or 6 boxes, new boxes of his stuff. So like, yeah, they are producing stuff that, and then declassifying stuff that the public hasn't seen before, but they're not solving it. Like,
because even like the whole release of the JFK files, like all of those files, I guess, were already in the National Archives, and like, I guess getting them digitized is valid and important, but it's, and
well, I mean, it is important. I've heard there's like warehouses and warehouses because of the I forget the name of the act right now, but the Records Retention Act or whatever that is, it forces every White House to retain physical copies of, and actually this debate, because in those, like there's warehouses around DC that are just filled with classified material. It's classified only because no one's taken the time to be like, yeah, we should declassify this. Like these folks are dead. These folks are dead. Like, wait, that's already been solved. But there's just stacks and stacks because any communication within any administration, which means hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people within the government, all those records have to be saved. So there was even a debate around there, the start of 2023. It was bipartisan about changing classifications. So I was watching that debate, and then the UAP stuff got thrown into it. And like the UAP stuff does kind of muddy the water, which is actually why I think, and so like take a step back and get to your question there. The contours feel a lot different this Congress, the 119th Congress, than the one that just ended in January or in December, the 118th Congress. Like senators, they're not playing ball anymore. And
right, because before there was like Kirsten Gillibrand and Marco Rubio, Chuck Schumer. Now like Rubio's Secretary of State, Schumer's kind of on the outs with the public and leadership, and Gillibrand is.
But Schumer, his UAPDA is still out there. The co-sponsor, that guy we were talking about, Senator Mike Rounds, he says he still plans to drop it. Like, but I've been dubious of Schumer on that. Like, the reason Schumer is attached to the UAPDA, and the reason he's the lead sponsor of it, or was when Democrats were in control, that's just because of a promise he made to former Majority Leader Harry Reid. Like, when I've talked, and we've had this confirmed from Schumer's staff, David Grusch, his allegations, like the whole UAP UFO topic did not come up at all. Like, it had nothing to do with their UAPDA, and that like confuses folks because I know in the community there's just like a lot of put on it.
It sort of came at the same time too. Like Grusch in the hearing, it was in like a couple month span that was really a electric time for the topic.
Well, and that's the thing. And so again, Schumer, and I kind of joke, I'm from Illinois. Like when Harry Reid left Senate and announced his retirement, he passed up Illinois Senator Dick Durbin, who's the current Democratic whip in the Senate. He passed him up and said, "Hey, Chuck Schumer has my blessing." Part of that's because, Schumer's more of a pit bull. He's, Durbin's too nice, blah, blah, blah. But he's also Chicagoan, so watch out. He might shank you if you're not looking. But so
back in the day,
because Durbin like laughs off the UAP topic, Schumer, he kissed Reid's hand. And so I always joke, I'm like, the reason Schumer became Democratic leader is just because he like
play ball on UFOs.
This topic, and so because he promised to carry on this bill. And so I think Schumer's just living up to that, the most basic promise he made to his predecessor and mentor and friend and all that. But Schumer doesn't care about this topic from what I've seen, which I think is why his amendment has just been gutted. Behind closed doors in these annual NDAA talks. Like, he was majority leader of the Senate. Like, the majority leader of the Senate does not get his measure gutted to his face. Like, that doesn't happen.
Unless he, like, doesn't really care about it too much.
Exactly. And so that's where, like, what do we see when Mitch McConnell was majority leader? Oh, he stacked the Supreme fucking Court. Like, so either Schumer is useless, which many progressives are now arguing. And I'm like, hey guys, about time y'all found out. But so either Schumer's completely freaking useless, or something else is going on that they're not being honest about. But like, if he really went to bat for this, he could have gotten a lot more of a win, I think. I mean, if his office is listening, like, hey, reach out to me, tell me where I'm wrong. But like, why is the majority leader seeing his own measure gutted 2 years in a row? Again, if he cared about it, he could have. And like, politics, in his defense, this is where I then played devil's advocate for him. So in his defense, because this was the first time House Republicans started that National Defense Authorization Bill up with like abortion policy, anti-trans stuff, and all these other like culture war social issues, which historically, because it deals with America's military, historically, again, up until like 2023, all that political BS, important stuff, but BS, when it comes to the brass tacks of America's military, all that stuff did put the Senate at a natural disadvantage at the start of their conference committee, where the Senate and the House get together and try to, negotiate through the differences in their two bills. And again, this is the National Defense Authorization Act. It doesn't fund our military, but our military kind of ceases to exist globally and here unless it's reauthorized annually, which is why it becomes what they call a Christmas tree. It just gets larded up with all this BS, it's kind of the contractor's Bill of Rights. The military industrial complex loves that bill. And so they're all lobbying and fighting in the background for it.
Yeah, it's also,
you go.
Yeah, that makes sense because and it also makes sense that there's so much going on that Schumer made this remarkable speech in December of 23, about, it was only 7 minutes talking about this bill. And then we haven't really heard much from him, except he did tweet a couple months ago, declassified UFO stuff. But
he did that was dunking. And he's that's just him playing troll, and his office did that. And they're like, haha, this is going to be funny. It's shut the fuck up. No one cares about your funny tweets. This isn't 2003 or 2013.
Right.
And so we'll see. The interesting thing, because you brought up Langley a little bit ago. And so even though the Senate now, I haven't really found a single senator. I talked to Martin Heinrich last week because your Congress gives themselves Memorial Day week off. They only give you Memorial Day off unless you're a service worker or something like that. And then you're SOL, your Congress doesn't have your back. But so Congress, before they left town this week, talking to New Mexico Senator Martin Heinrich, who was familiar with Grusch and had tracked that a little bit. He kind of pushed back on some of the claims as much as he could publicly because he's a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Right.
And this is classified information currently. And so he at least was engaged in the last Congress. I was talking to him last week. He just looked at me like, really, Laslo? You're still asking me this shit? And it was just kind of and he said, and they haven't posted it yet, I need to. But he said something I'm just not following that. And so that's where next time I go and talk to him about this topic, I'm going to lead with either drones or UAS.
Right. And actually, that's something I kind of noticed in your, the way that you approach certain congressmen. You talked to a Virginia representative the other day, and you didn't say the word UAP, but you said UAS.
Yep.
It's the way that because I guess can you just describe those interactions? You only have a couple seconds to kind of catch them, and you want to be as tight as possible and not turn them off. Are people kind of open to talking about UAP, or do you have to censor yourself in asking?
Well, so I'm a little different than what you see in I'm from the White House press corps. When you're watching Karen Levitt or whatever, they're talking to the White House press corps, half the time, and you can kind of tell this, if someone's asking a question and there's a camera on them, then that means they probably don't really care that much about the answer. All they're doing is they just want their question to, make the nightly news. And so that's where after those press briefings, you'll see the CNN folks come out with oh, Caitlin Collins asked this. Well, then if you're watching Fox, you're oh, Peter Ducey got this question answered. So they're not actually covering the news of what happened in there.
Self-promotional.
They're just covering their correspondent, which makes sense. That's what greedy corporations are supposed to do. But it's that's not why I got into the news business, guys. And
right. So have you ever played that briefing room game? Have you ever tried doing that? Or you just, no?
It's wasting my time. And I'm a feature writer. And so at the time, if I go, it's just to so Speaker Johnson sees my eyes, so Schumer sees my eyes, but because I've been a one-man band for about 2 decades, the times where I've asked in like broken news on national cannabis policy, well, if I ask that in front of the 100, 150 of my peers, well, they've got entire bureaus. No, they're going to scoop me with my own headline, you know? And so I'll do it every once in a while, but to me, I want them one-on-one. And I say, like, my job as a political reporter, because remember, I also teach political communications. It's like I've trained a Trump press secretary, now a kind of senior one, and I've trained the political director of MoveOn.org in the same classroom. So like first day of my classes, I come in, they're like, who's this guy with tats and the weird hair up at the front? And I don't even know, like, is that the professor or whatever?
Yeah, it's like rolling in with the skateboard.
Yeah, so once enough of them are in their seats, then I go to the door, I slam it shut, and I go, your fucking politics, stay out there. Like, we're here to talk history, we're here to talk strategies, ... And so I say my job as a political reporter is to get lawmakers to fuck up and tell me what they're actually thinking. And they're trained by the press secretaries that I train to avoid the press and evade their thoughts. You know, that's what
like have really scripted answers. You can tell that, like,
and that's what political consultants still tell members, especially on the Republican side, like, hey, avoid cannabis, like that's gonna get you in trouble with your evangelical base. It's like, you fucking fools. In Mississippi, 70% plus of Republican voters voted for cannabis legalization. And then I believe they tried to change the law because they're like, oh, we got to granny state this shit. You know, people want medicinal marijuana. Oh, their sky is falling. We're not going to be able to lock up black people anymore. Oh, like, this is terrible. And so, like, yeah, I don't trust these politicians and the political consulting class at all. Because when you look at this issue, UAPs, what, 70% of the American public is kind of ahead of Congress on it. And it's like, yeah, of course there's extraterrestrial life out there. Who knows if it's come to Earth, but like, you know, duh. And like lawmakers won't even get that far. Like what I had former governor, Idaho Republican Senator Jim Rich, who's like the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee, he told me, oh, because like after Grusch's stuff came out, I interviewed all 100 senators.
Yeah, that was like really great work. You like, and what was that? What was that like? Like catching all the senators? Like, is it a lot of work to like figure out where they're going to be? And like, how was that whole process? It was like the whole month of December, I think.
Well, yeah. So I say we're professional stalkers in the press corps, and like you kind of learn like what if it's a nice day out, Cory Booker's going to walk from his office. If it's raining, a lot of lawmakers who walk outside are going to like be in the basement. There's these underground trams in the Capitol. Older lawmakers during votes are going to be by the restroom because they got small bladders, you know? So like my job gets a little creepy, but whatever, someone's got to do it. But like Jim Rich, who is the head of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, told me, I don't read UFO stories. Like, take a step back from that statement. I don't read UFO stories. So if there's, like, as we heard the FBI testify this past December, but them saying they don't know what was above Jersey skies, does that mean Senator/Chairman Rich is not reading any stories about the invasion of U.S. airspace in the Northeast? Because technically, every one of those objects is a UFO. And technically, when Langley Air Force Base was shut down for 17 days in 2023, technically, and like the Pentagon just gave a briefing a year out from that to former vice presidential candidate Tim Kaine, Virginia senator, and then also Virginia's other senator, Mark Warner, who at the time was the chair of the Intelligence Committee. Now he's vice chair. Well, the Pentagon, a year after Langley, was shut down for 17 days. And that's where we have our 5th generation stealth fighter fleet, these Raptors. Langley Air Force Base is 200 miles from DC, but if you're in a stealth Raptor, you're 30 minutes from DC. And so they are a key, essential part of the protection for the president, for Congress, for the nation's capital. Though the entire Raptor fleet, billions of dollars worth of planes, had to be moved in 2023 because of the 17-day incursion from these unknown objects. And a year after that, the base was shut down. The Pentagon told Kane and Warner just a couple months ago that they still have no idea who or what or where or why. They don't know where those objects came from, what they were. And that's where both of them looked at me like, yes, we know we've been lied to by the executive branch before. We don't think it's this, or more misled. You know, no one's going to lie to the senator, but they're going to use fancy talk to like get around it. But they're like, we don't think they were evading. We're unsettled and pissed off because they literally have no idea. So whether this is foreign adversaries, and that's where like someone like Mike Rounds kind of comes down, thinking it's foreign adversaries. Same with former astronaut Mark Kelly from Arizona. Mark Kelly is so anti-UFO. Like if I ask him about UFOs, UAPs, like his eyes roll, he laughs it off. But so I talked to him about UAS or drones. He's 100% convinced, like he's so convinced that it can't be anything extraterrestrial, that he's 100% convinced that these are foreign adversaries regularly invading U.S. airspace.
And they're still not doing anything about it.
And one of these objects just hit a fighter plane in Arizona above Luke Air Force Base, or the Barry Goldwater Field, which is literally what Kelly has been bringing up for more than a year. He brought it up with the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But for him, it's purely drones and the drone problem. Like, cool, I don't care what you call it, but your people on the ground there in the Air Force say they have no idea what it is. FBI and Border Patrol say they have no idea what it is. DOJ, I'm like, why did you bring DOJ? But they got no idea what it is. And so, yeah, just the dereliction of duty. And I think a lot of it stems from a lack of curiosity, both in the media, our fault, but then also lawmakers. And I think now that the UAP caucus has become the secrets caucus, it's kind of tainted the issue more. And so again, when I'm talking to these senators, I have to come at it from a different angle. And that's where asking them about drones, these incursions, their planes being hit, because none of them really want to engage anymore on the UAP topic. I mean, some might, like Cory Booker told me, he's like, my staff, he's like, they can't get enough of this topic. And then John Fetterman, the Pennsylvania Democrat, he is really glued into this topic. He's just not on any of the relevant committees. He's not on armed services or.
So Fetterman's like really. So Fetterman's really into this topic.
Fetterman's like a believer. Yeah. Well, he's like all into it. But
I've never heard that.
But he's not in. That's where you got to look at it. Askapoll.com, askapollUAP.com. We've got his exclusive on there, and it's funny, he's just like, because now you do have some lawmakers who just come up to me and they're like, hey, like, what's the news? Anything new?
They're coming up to you.
Like I'm breaking news individually to lawmakers on the UAP topic, awesome. For better and for worse.
That's such an awesome place to be. Probably a weird place to be as well.
It's both. It's a mind fuck.
Yeah. So you said like Cory Booker's staffers are really into this topic, and you've also like talked to Chuck Schumer's staffer, and I saw like recently you were like talking to Burchett about this, and then he was busy, so his staffer was just like talking to me offline. Like, to what extent, like, so like the staffers are probably like more plugged into this topic than the lawmakers themselves. Is that kind of the impression you get?
That's 100% of the time on 100% of issues. Like every lawmaker, if you think about it, where are you based? You're in Connecticut?
Yeah.
And so like Connecticut, you'll have your Senator Chris Murphy. He's going to have an office in Hartford. He's going to have an office. He's going to need one out in like the western part of the state. They're going to have 2 or 3 offices. And like those offices are more set up to deal with constituents and constituent services. But like sometimes the senator does have to get on the phone and be like, hey, my veteran who lost his freaking legs fighting for the nation in Afghanistan, like needs his benefits, blah, blah, blah. And so they're a U.S. senator, like everything. If it's potholes on the street, that funding, some of it comes from Washington. Oh, schools, for now at least, public schools still get some funding from Washington.
Yeah.
So like, they're also like Armed Services Committee or Judiciary Committee dealing with all of Trump's nominations. You know, in the House, you'll be put on like one key committee, but then you'll have subcommittees. And so like every lawmaker is torn in a million directions. And like the saddest thing, a big part of that, we had back in 2009, I believe it was J.I. Packer for the New Yorker wrote this piece called The Empty Chamber on the Senate. And it was right before the Tea Party wave of 2010. And like a lot of Obama's agenda was getting bottled up and just dying in the Senate. So he did this beautiful profile on the empty chamber that it was, that U.S. Senate. In that piece, he gets two sitting lawmakers, two sitting senators to admit, and they were Chris Dodd, former Connecticut senator, and then Lamar Alexander, Republican from Tennessee. Both of them admitted that 75% of their job as a U.S. senator, 75% of their job was fundraising, which should disgust every single person.
Yeah,
and like what have we seen
they're already stretched in all so many directions, just like dealing with issues, and then on top of that,
yeah, and like what have we seen since then? Well, I think pretty sure Citizens United happened post.
That was in 2009. Like, yeah, and that's just gotten exponentially worse since then.
And so that's where like things have gotten worse. So now I'm like, wait, does that mean senators are now spending 95% of their time fundraising? So like, it's just natural in this unnatural environment that is Washington, that is the swamp, that lawmakers aren't going to be totally burst. They'll have a couple projects and like they'll be conversant ahead of hearings, but like they're just not going to be devoting a ton of their time. But that's where their staffs really matter. And so you'll have different staffers on different levels, whether it's levels of intrigue, levels of caring about the issue. Like sometimes you can kind of tell, like, oh, it seems like that lawmaker got a new staffer who's saddled with this issue and like they don't care about it like that other staffer did. You know, you can just kind of see a change. And so like with that, like a lot of people in the community expect lawmakers to know the names of stuff. And I'm like, guys, you're coming to me at like a PhD level when I'm dealing with kindergartners. And so like, yeah, I can like toss that question right over the head of these lawmakers, or I can meet them where they're at and try to feel what they know, and inform them along the way, hopefully.
Maybe Schumer is like not as versed in his own bill as like the people in his office that were writing it. And that
totally. And it'll be interesting because that measure, Senator Rounds told me earlier this year at askapol.com or Askapol UAPs, he said that he plans to reintroduce that amendment. And it was crazy. So last year during that NDAA, again, it's this annual dance they do where they have to authorize the military before they even fund the military. Well, that's the bill where the UAPDA, Schumer and Rounds bill, has been like tried to or added as an amendment or attempted to be added, but then gutted a little bit and then part of it added.
Yeah.
Well, the House members, so the actual UAP caucus in the House, they had no idea in 2024 that the UAPDA was being reintroduced in the Senate. And so like,
wait, so that you're saying like the House oversight didn't know that it was being reintroduced?
None of them, not a single member of the UAP caucus or now the Secrets Task Force had any idea that Schumer and Brown's bill or amendment was being dropped again in the NDAA. That until me at Askapol informed them. And then we had, I believe, Congressman Garcia, Democrat from California. He dropped it, introduced it in the House. It was kind of the first time I saw politics enter into the issue, because it was kind of him dunking on Republicans, being like, look, they abandoned this issue. I'm like, look, you're in a really safe seat, and it's the middle of an election, and you're just hating on the other party. Like, it's hyper tribalist.
Yeah. And it was interesting, the whole topic kind of went silent for the whole year before the election. And then right after the election the new hearing was announced in November. And now it's, all these things are kind of ramping up. So I guess, were people kind of nervous? Would you bring this up during the election cycle a lot? And people were just, can you sense
Let me say this, because we do live listening sessions where it's me and a lawmaker, and then, our subscribers at Askapol, but we do them on Discord or whatever. So we did a couple last year, I believe, with maybe the year before, with Burchett and Burleson, and both of them really enjoyed it, loved our community. Were those are really thoughtful questions. They were that was great. Hell, New York Post even wrote a story based off it. So then we had to institute a rule. Hey, if you're a news organization that is worth millions and you're piggybacking off of little old Askapol, you got to alert us before you get on our calls with lawmakers, and we might be shaking you down for some cash.
It's big business, UAP.
But so that's where we so last year I tried to get co-chair of the UAP caucus, Miss Anna Paulina Luna, who's now the chair of the Secrets Task Force, and her aide was like, nope. And she didn't just say no, we're never going to do an interview with Askapol. It was, nope, not right now. And I was like, oh, that makes sense, because it was in the lead up, it was even in the summer, maybe late spring, but they were already focused purely on November. And so that's where we are in this kind of sweet spot, boiling spot, where yes, the big focus is on Trump's agenda and that whole reconciliation package, the one big beautiful bill, all that. The one that Elon Musk is ripping on. Don't let that be lost on any conservatives out there listening. Well, so that has really sucked a lot of the air out of lawmakers and really been the focus of this town. But it's also been stalled. And so in a sense, it's been paralyzed. And I'm like, how much can you guys negotiate around the same proposal, get nowhere? Tell me you don't have free time for other issues. Because I look at your social media feeds, and y'all are dunking a lot on a lot of issues. And so I think a lot of it comes down to will. Some of it comes down to resources. But again, in this House under Speaker Johnson, the margin is so thin. He can only afford to lose 3 or so votes on any bill. And, he's got a very diverse ideologically conference, from the nutty far alt-right folks to the wannabe moderates.
Yeah, the tech right.
Yeah. And so you, knowing that Johnson can only lose 3 votes on anything, I'm like, wait, you guys aren't really serious about UAPs, because y'all didn't flex. Literally, when Speaker Johnson was up, it took Speaker McCarthy back in 2023, took him 10 days or 11 votes or whatever to win it. And that whole time, Republicans were winning concessions for one pet project or another, so McCarthy slowly got more and more votes.
Leveraging your power.
Yeah. And so I'm like, guys, if you really cared about this, and so in their defense, again, playing devil's advocate, what they would say, I believe, is they do, at least the Republicans, on obviously the Democrats just roll their eyes and they're like, bullshit. But the Republicans do say, and I believe that they actually do have faith in it. They trust that this administration is going to be more transparent than any that's ever come before, blah, blah, blah. And they are kind of backing that up. So Luna, she's been having, it seems like there's clear communication between her and Tulsi Gabbard, who came from the House, who's now the director of national intelligence. So like, that's where they got those new JFK files, because Tulsi Gabbard had someone find him and said, boom, we're going to release these for the first time. And so there could be stuff like that happening in the background. I know with Secretary of State Rubio, he used to be the vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. And like, he actually told me right after Grusch's claims came out, he was like, Matt, and like, I've covered him for years for Florida stations, so we know each other. And he's like, Matt, this is different. He goes, us as the Intel Committee, he's like, we're sent whistleblower complaints all the time. He goes, but this was the first one that was sent to us by the Inspector General, marked credible and marked urgent. And so Rubio said that, then I think there was a staff briefing. And when Rubio got really upset with that group Arrow that was supposed to be handling this, like the Senate kind of set up Arrow to like be their brain trust on these issues.
Right. Now Luna's all against Arrow.
But a big part of the reason is because senators don't want to be talking about UFOs and aliens and stuff. So they literally created Arrow to do their thinking, like to outsource their thinking on the topic. And then Arrow kind of proved this failure to them. And so like Rubio, our last interview with him at Ask a Poll UAPs, he's just like so frustrated at the former head of that, Sean Kirkpatrick. He's like, I wish Arrow, because I was asking him questions, and he's like, that's Arrow's job, and they failed.
It's almost like they don't want to focus on that themselves, so they're like outsourcing it. And
100%.
Like, so now like no one's focused on it because no one wants to like take on the job of actually like sort of digging into it.
That very much is the feeling. And like, we'll see. I feel like Senator Gillibrand from New York, she had a public hearing at the end of the last session, and like it was like the House, when they had their David Grusch hearing, the lines looped around for almost a mile. They like literally looped around 3-4 different hallways. And like, I was covering Congress when they had the Major League Baseball steroid hearings and investigation, where you had like all these big name athletes.
Right.
All those big name athletes were there. The line outside was like a quarter or a tenth of what the UAP folks showed in the House when Grusch testified. It was just like
electric.
So many people. Electric.
Like,
all these reporters were there as well, and so like it got all of them a boost on social media, which they love to feel the relevancy through those fucking algorithms. But so when Gillibrand had her hearing, the community's become very dubious of her, and I think a little bit wrongfully, but I think that's because her office has kind of done some dumb fumbles where they've made some comms mistakes. Because I think Gillibrand, remember, she ran for president, and I think she looks at the topic like, hey, for one, national security issue, because she has been fighting for sensors, so that we don't have balloons invade our higher atmosphere. And guess we also need lower sensors because America can easily be invaded by drones or whatever at very low levels. And I'm like, guys, we drop $1 trillion a year. Like, our military industrial complex is like getting new Beamers, getting new Benzes, while literally America is so susceptible. Like, we're witnessing right now in Ukraine the first ever drone war. And America, I think it was the FBI that testified just in December that less than $500,000 of their budget goes to UASs, unmanned aerial systems, drones. Like, the idiocy.
Whole Defense Department?
No. The entire FBI. And so, like, remember, drone incursions over U.S. soil, that's FBI.
Right.
Pentagon, they have power over their bases. So when military bases become involved, yeah, that falls under Pentagon as well. But then there's overlapping laws, But like, no, FBI, and that's what the UAP caucus, we just broke that news last week.
Yeah.
UAP caucus had their mind blown because they went to the FBI for the first time. Yeah, and they find out, I guess people in the community knew about this office. Members of Congress didn't. The UAP office and the Secrets Task Force spent the past 2 years getting nowhere in their investigation. And I'm actually pretty sure that once Congressman Burleson hired that whistleblower, David Grusch, it seems like Grusch was like, hey, do you guys know about that FBI office? And so boom, they went and had that meeting. So now they're talking about totally scrapping Arrow and flushing out that FBI office. But I'm like, guys, Arrow was created basically by senators to be public facing. Like they were all getting pressure from many of their constituents, or at least like the loudest constituents on this topic. And you know, you're hearing complaints from service members, you know, pilots, ship captains, but then also just like regular everyday commercial airline pilots. And so there was just, they actually listened to the public. There was growing concern about this issue. So what did Congress do? They created Arrow and they literally outsourced their job on this. And they're like, all right, that's it. We're done. I'm like, no, guys. That's far from the end of it.
Because you actually have to like provide oversight on the thing that you can't just get away from like not focusing on something. At some point you have to like.
And I think part of it last year was a lot of these members do tend to be newer. Like now, I guess a lot of them are on their second term, but last year they were in their first term. It's like not a lot of them, or most all of them, are on the oversight committee, which, you know, does investigations, all that. But the intelligence committee also does investigations. They're just classified and they get a lot more information and we don't get to hear about it. But that's where like none of them have that clout. And it was only Nancy Mace. Well, I guess Matt Gaetz was on Armed Services Committee, but now that little pedo's gone. And then Nancy Mace, she
great replacement.
she got moved to Armed Services Committee. So now she's got a foot in that door. But even though she was already in Congress, she, you know, the Capitol works as a seniority system. So she's lower in seniority. So I don't think she wants to make a lot of waves on that committee quite yet. You know, it's wise to like get to a new committee and just like sit there and learn, you know, tell all these old dying white males like, yeah, we're learning from you. Yeah, they're learning what not to do from you because they want your job. And so that's where Mace has been kind of quiet, like summing it up. But she was the one who chaired last November's hearing. And so I think them, and like kind of back to what I was saying with Gillibrand, I'm pretty sure, you know, this former presidential candidate, I think her and her team, who were very politically savvy, they were looking at like, you know, Reddit, and they're like, whoa, UFO Reddit's got like, I think now it's like 3.4 million strong, but then it was like 3.1. So it's only been growing. And I think they wanted to like tap into that. But I think they ended up like biting off way more than they could chew. And so like when her hearing wasn't attended because she had like kind of, people felt like she was politicking with the issue, kind of laughing about it with constituents in one video. Well, I think that's why she hasn't been as gung-ho this Congress. Doesn't mean she's still not engaged. I think some of them sometimes want to be less public facing on it because they don't want that backlash. But I think that's where like there's a lot of power and clout in this community where instead of spending so much time cursing out, say, Jim Himes, you know, the top House Democrat on the Intel committee, you know, instead of like cursing him out so much, like he's actually engaged with UAP Twitter on X, you know. And so I'm pretty sure like we know each other fairly well because I've covered Congress for WSHU in Fairfield, Connecticut, and WNPR in Hartford. Like, I'm pretty sure Himes would be willing to come on and do a live session with me where he gets questions from our subscribers and audience and all that. I'm pretty sure he would. I'm just like, it needs to be cursed at a little bit less. And I think people kind of get it, or starting to, but I'm like, honey sometimes works a lot better than the alternative with lawmakers. And like, there's now a new chair of the House Intel Committee. It's no longer this guy Mike Turner. It's now this guy Crawford.
Well, yeah, because Mike Turner was really people were making waves about him because he is in the district of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and there was a lot of rumors.
And he gets all this money from contractors and all that. Well, like, guess what? Most everyone in Congress, like, if you think a member of Congress is pure and walks on water, then give me 5 of what you're taking. Oh my God, I'd love to live in that alternative reality. But no, like, it's just a mythical reality. And like, that is kind of the beauty and also the headache with Ask a Poll. Like, my sources for Ask a Poll are 535 liars. So like, all we do is sort of bring you all in. And my intention is to really show
all the mirrors.
Yeah, to show you guys, like, it's actually worse than you thought. But that's where, instead of like an article that I would do for my other clients, it's just like, we're putting out one interview with one lawmaker, and then like, don't take that as gospel, because a lot of times folks do, and they're like, oh, Burchett's shit. Well, then the next week I do a post with Burchett, and they're like, fuck that guy, he's a fucking commie bastard, how dare he, like, doesn't care about the issue. And I'm like, guys, breathe. Like, lawmakers are multifaceted beings. Multifaceted as we would hope.
Yeah, it's also just, don't be careful reading the tea leaves, because you don't have much to go on. Like, so you have 535 liars, but are the staffers much better? Like, are you able to sort of get in touch with staffers and sort of hit them up offline or anything?
Well, yeah. But here's my thing: politicians lie. So, 535 liars hold a lot of power. They're not 100% liars, but like, if you thought Obama walked on water, sit in on my course. If you think Trump walks on water, get some glasses. I rip on every party, every politician, and I'm cordial with every party, every politician. That said, for me, I do believe the information I get from lawmakers. If I didn't trust what they were telling me, I wouldn't be putting it out there. Actually, sometimes with Ask a Poll, I do use it to debunk rumors. And so I try not to give oxygen. It's a fine line, I try not to give oxygen to falsehoods. But like, I was stuck on one of the Senate subways with there's these trams that ride underneath the Capitol.
Not the sandwich restaurant.
Yeah, and like, one of them's, the newer one's electric. And like, I saw when I was hopping on it that at the time it was Chair Mark Warner, Senate Intel Chair Warner, and his Deputy Chief of Staff, who I've known for years because I covered him for Virginia Public Radio, and they were alone. And so I just beelined it, and those doors are unforgiving. They will take your arm off. And so I just snuck in, and I was just like, oh, I didn't see you guys here, which is total bullshit. And they both looked at me like, you asshole. I took my mic, got my little mini Marantz.
Oh, you got it right. Right with you.
I turn it off, put it in my Suco pocket, and I go, hey, let's chat. It's been a long time coming, because he's kind of felt ambushed by Ask a Poll, where, last time I had him alone, his staffer wasn't there, but last time I had him alone on one of those trams, he was like, can we go on background or off the record? And I was like, no, because you're stuck on this thing with me for another 60 seconds at least. So no, I'm going to stay on the record. And then once we landed, I was like, yeah, we can go on off the record now. But I had you. And so talking to him and his staffer, I was like, guys, I know that you don't give any credence. Like you think David Grusch is misconstruing stuff. You laugh off the House investigation. And like Warner, he's Gang of Eight. So he's part of the special group that is read in on things that he can't even discuss with other members of Congress and even other members of the Senate Intel Committee, just because he's so senior. Right. And so, but I was like, guys, you all, like, do you realize that in the past, like, year and a half, I've debunked more UFO, UAP rumors in a year and a half than the entire federal government has in the past 70 years. And Warner, he's sitting down, he looks up at his aide who's standing up and he goes, is that true? And she goes, yeah, but, you know, their complaints like, but you also like give too much oxygen to rumors. And I'm like, no, like you all deal with that.
You're the guys investigating it.
Yeah. And so there's different pressure points, but like, yeah, Mark Warner, I trust. And, you know, I've just known him for years. There are times like it sucks because the Capitol is like stuck in the 1800s in many ways. So like there's no video on, basically no video allowed in most of the Capitol. In the basements, in the office buildings, you can do it. Outside, you can do it, but no video on at least the second floor where the Senate chamber and House chamber is. And even there's restrictions on us in the press corps. They're just outdated and dumb, but they're there. And so, like, I wish I could show you all Mark Warner's eyes, because sometimes I'll ask him a question and his eyes flash. I have an answer for that. Like, I don't think he's a good poker player, or he's trying to tell me something. That's where you can kind of hear him often avoiding saying certain things because my mic is on.
Right.
And then we either have a conversation later, which he hasn't in private. He hasn't told me he's seen the jewels or anything like that, but he just knows a lot more than he can say publicly. And I think everyone needs to remember, like, these are classified topics. So anything we are getting out of these lawmakers on classified topics is kind of not a miracle. It might be called skills.
Yeah.
You know, but because what? AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's at the table on this topic because of her suspicion of military contractors and, you know, the military industrial complex. So when she comes out of classified skiff briefings on UAPs, she literally, the lady who has ended social media, you know, like Obama, I have a quaint book on my shelf. Obama, the first social media president. I'm like, no. Like Trump is kind of actually the first social media president. But AOC just like has revolutionized the way that politicians feel like they can be empowered by the grassroots. Like I think she's got like 12 million followers, where the Speaker of the House only has like 3 or 4 million followers.
Right.
So she's like photogenic, loves cameras, loves the press corps, always talking to us, blah blah blah. And like, I used to be the correspondent for Vice and Vice News Tonight. The joke was that I was the squad correspondent, because anything AOC or the squad did, Vice wanted it, and it led their website and crashed the internet. Well, so when AOC walks out of her classified skiff briefing on this topic, she's got a very wise rule. Nope, not talking, not saying anything. Because these lawmakers, each time they're in one of those skiffs, the classified little rooms, they have to sign away their life and say, hey, I agree that I can get sent to jail if I divulge what's talked about in here. And this is kind of where we've gotten complaints from folks like Burchett, because Burchett's like, I can read something in the New York Times in the morning, and then I go into a skiff and I get the classified briefing on the topic that the New York Times that I read about that morning. But because I got that briefing in the classified skiff, I didn't learn anything new, but now I can't talk about it. And so there's been kind of a love-hate relationship with that whole setting. But
that's like a whole complaint with Arrow too, is that like things that were reported to Arrow become classified, even though they're like kind of public knowledge.
yeah.
And
Well, and so like what I do with AOC, I just wait. So I'll like walk with her down the hall. I'll ask her some questions because I like to get lawmakers not responding to me. I'm like, you're saying something when you say nothing. Um, but then I just look for her a week later, 2 weeks later, and won't mention the skiff, won't mention classified, but I'll take the information I get from other lawmakers exiting, and you get a little bit of info here, little bit here, little bit here. Well, then I like take that info, and instead of me asking about this classified information, I'm just conversant on that classified information. So then they start talking as if, and then sometimes they catch themselves and they're like, wait, is that classified?
yeah, they like have to think to themselves, like, that's probably a tricky place to be for these guys. Like,
but it's just little tricks of the trade like that. And so that's where like no one lawmaker has the mind of God or whatever. But I think I get a little bit more of the story each different lawmaker I talk to. And that's where I'm like slowly talking to every lawmaker in Congress, just because one, me asking the questions makes them have to like look into it, etc. Um, but literally, and we're now seeing a bunch of these, like there's more attention now on UAS or these unmanned aerial systems, um, but not nearly enough. Like America is so susceptible. Like if these are foreign nations, adversaries or whatever, guys, they've been doing. If that's the case, like if Senator Rounds and Senator Kelly are correct, and these are just foreign adversaries, guys, American airspace is not secure and is regularly invaded by foreign adversaries. If these senators are to be believed, like in one sense, that's a kind of a lot scarier than extraterrestrial life. On depending on what it could be or might be, etc.
right. And it's like that is scarier. And like, I guess speaking on this, like on the record versus off the record, like you said, people tend to be more candid or like more willing to speak off the record. Like, are there things that people or staffers that like when you text staffers or anything, like you care to keep information confidential, and like what sort of procedures do you have around that? And are people like more candid with you off the record about what's going on?
People are candid with me on the record. There's just something like, again, I've been covering Congress 19 years, so I think I've actually been covering Congress longer than like 75 or 80% of lawmakers have even been in Congress. But then also like MTG and some others call me Prof Laslo. But like there's just little tricks of the trade. So like what? I always have my notebook. Most reporters these days don't have a notebook with them. They just walk up to lawmakers with their big shiny phone, just like screaming LED in their face. And it's like, guys, if you like literally, guess what? I used to be a Vice News Tonight correspondent. So like when I would talk with Chair Mark Warner on the convention floor, at the DNC, he'd be like cursing up a storm, blah, 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 just like one of the bros. Well, then I interview him for NPR with this little mic. And, he's a little more, staying in his lane, but like a Southern gentleman because it's an NPR audience. Well, if I'm just chatting with him, and so I just tuck my mic underneath my notepad. So I'm like taking notes, but recording it. And like, I don't hide it from them. It's on my side. But
right, it's like not like a flashing.
I don't want them to see anything flashing. I want them to forget I have it. I don't want to hide it from them. Like that would be unethical. But I want them to like see it when I come up, and then for them to just like slowly start telling me what they're actually thinking. And they kind of naturally do it. If you look on my social media today at Matt Laslo or whatever, just dropped this big Q&A with the top Democrat on Marjorie Taylor Greene's Doge committee. And I'm like, there's just a bunch of little interesting anecdotes in that. Where like last week, I guess it was the week MTG announced she wasn't running for the Senate, but her Democratic counterpart, Melanie Stansbury from New Mexico, she's like, something's off with MTG. So in the middle of the hearing, I tried to pass her some Cheez-Its because I was like, man, she might just be angry, you know? And so like getting that human side of lawmakers, and then like she goes on to just like rip Elon Musk from like very intellectual from intellectual angles. And so like I just that's my job, to get lawmakers to relax, talk to me. And so like we were talking about earlier, like you're not going to ever hear me, or it's going to be rare where I'm asking a forceful question. No, my whole MO is I read a ton. Yeah, I read more than 100% of Congress, maybe 99%, but like, oh, I know some shit. And so and like, because Republicans are in power now, like most of what I watch is sadly Fox News, OAN, Newsmax,
like
what
what's going
Steve
on
Bannon in the
TV.
war room, like Steve Bannon's producer, COO, Grace Chang, she fucking loves me. The Proud Boys, they fucking love me, except for before they stormed my office at the Capitol because I was getting death threats right before then, guys. But so like my job is to be a whisperer, and so like what I do is like it's not being a chameleon. I kind of put it more like the biblical BS of like being all things to all people, and so I kind of go up to lawmakers, tell them what I know, but half the time I'm just like saying yeah because I want their thoughts, but a lot of times I just like describe their thinking or their party's thinking, or hey, I read this in National Review or the Examiner.
Right.
Is this where you are? And then they're like, oh, he knows. He speaks our language. Like he gets it. And so then they tell me shit that the press secretaries call me up and say, he wasn't supposed to say that. Well,
right.
you do your fucking job. I do my fucking job. I do mine better than you.
Yeah, it's like just Andrew Callahan. Are you familiar with Channel 5? He kind of has that similar vibe where it's more just about getting people to talk and just being like a friendly character in the room and like showing.
Like my thing is lawmakers left, right, and center, because especially because trust in the press corps has just been demolished by Trump. Like to me, the scariest poll is Gallup in 2023, I believe. Like the poll doesn't show that half the American public think we're fake news and the enemy. The poll shows half the American public thinks us in the media are actively lying to them. And so like that's where I get worried. I'm like, how can we have a democracy if half the nation lives in this universe, half the nation lives in this universe? Pardon me, a third and a third. Is my biggest takeaway from the 2024 election is the 90 some odd million Americans who are of voting age who just sat it out and said, yeah, I've seen all the ads. I know the sky is falling, but none of you talk about anything that matters to me. And so like, that's kind of why I launched Ask a Poll. I say I'm going after the unnewsed. Like no one was covering UAPs. I'm like, hey, I take your issue seriously. Come with me into the Capitol. And hey, let's get lawmakers talking about what you care about. Well, so we also have done that with drugs, crypto, and drugs. I mean, it's medicinal marijuana, but whatever. Drugs is pithier, cannabis. So AI, crypto, all that. Like, I want all the folks out there who feel like Washington abandoned them, that there's nothing this town will ever do for them. Because, like, yeah, left, right, and center, you're onto something. These are selfish bastards. Like, I think contemporary Washington, our curse is that both parties have perfected selling doom. And so they no longer have to like accomplish anything for you. They just have to sell doom and fear. And so then you vote with them because, oh shit, like I hear that other party eats babies. Like,
right. And I guess you've been in covering Congress since at least like 2008, 2009. Like have those trends have you felt like it's gotten less camaraderie and more like Like, have these trends like been getting worse during your time? Like, can you feel that on the ground?
Well, like when I got here in 2006, I arrived like a week after I graduated for a 6-month unpaid internship. But like, there was no social media. So like, I was one of the earlier adapters on Twitter, which I think was like 2009, 10. And like, I was in the running that year for one of those Twitter Shorty Awards or whatever. Company at the time sent me up to uh, New York for this like black tie event, which is where I first met Cory Booker, who does not drink. Cory Booker won his category. I, Matt Laslo, was beat out by The Nation magazine. So an entire magazine beat me out for the political category. And so I went with all the other losers to the bar downstairs, sponsored by Maker's Mark. And every time I saw Cory Booker, I accidentally, because at the time he was mayor of Newark, and like he was pretty revolutionary with how he used Twitter. Like if someone said, "Oh, I got a pothole," he'd be like, "Boom." Send over a crew to work on it, all that. So every time I saw energetic young Cory Booker that night, I just know I was slurring words because I kept calling him governor. I was like, "Hey, governor, governor, when are you gonna come to DC?" I was like, "I know you got your eye on my town." And then he's like leaving, getting into his black SUV with a security detail, and I'm outside smoking, and I was like, "You have a good one, governor. No, I'll be seeing you in DC." Like, woke up the next morning just like, "Did you call the mayor governor?" Okay, Sarah. And so all that to say, like, yeah, I've been a part of that evolution where academically I would shit on the House and the Senate at this point and say, I call the Capitol like the greatest re-election center known to womankind. Like we literally have bipartisan studios, House and Senate, with like full-on podcast gear, like nicer studios than NPR. They have green screens, bipartisan again, green screens in these studios. Media is not allowed. Current Senator, former House member Lisa Blunt Rochester from Delaware, her and her staff invited me in because she had to do a quick interview before I interviewed her. And I kind of like hid my press pass because I was like, I'm not allowed in here, but I've been dying to get in here for a decade. And being in there, I took a few pictures, and I think I do some op-eds for Columbia Journalism Review underneath my professor cap. And I think the first and only op-ed I did for them was on this. And so they used some of my pictures of that studio because I was just like, like lawmakers in both parties literally are hiding how they use your taxpayer dollars so that they can electioneer instead of doing their jobs that we sent them there to do. And so now that we have social media and all of that, or now that social media is our currency, is our like way of living, it's our everything in many ways. We have what the founders envisioned as an internally focused institution. Like, guys, it was radical for the founders to give 2-year terms to the House at the founding when they were writing the Constitution. Only one state had a 1 year, or one state had biennial terms, 2-year terms. One had 6-month terms, and the rest were all 1-year terms. So it was this radical compromise to give House members 2-year terms. Why'd they do it? To give, and it's a little undemocratic, it was to give lawmakers space from their constituents. Because for one, there's shitty roads, or like back then, horse and buggies would have to like go miles out of their way if a bridge was washed out on a river. So even like the first Congress couldn't even meet for a few days because there weren't enough members there for quorum. And so like lawmakers intended, or pardon me, the founders intended for statesmen, sorry ladies, stateswomen came later, but the founders didn't get everything right, but they envisioned public service and like being in Congress where like you would have someone from Georgia come up here to DC and then go back down and talk with his constituents and be like, holy shit, guys. So I was actually spent the last 2 years like studying up on maritime law. I was wrong. Like, I actually learned this. And so, like, that's what the founders envisioned, where lawmakers have that space from their constituents to become experts on these issues. Now, what do we have? Now we have lawmakers who know how to dunk digitally. They don't know how to get bills passed, which would be like an actual dunk, or maybe that'd be a goal. No, they don't score goals. We have a useless Congress that's great at revving up, you know, great at selling themselves, great at fundraising, great at fucking us all over. Not cynical at all.
Yeah, and on top of it, there's aliens, allegedly.
But like, that is where I like issues like this, because we all know what they're going to say when it's tax policy, Medicaid. We know Republicans, like, you know, Democrats are going to do this. Like,
it's just like comes out of left field. So it's almost like all the automatic responses that have been built up, you know, they're just like, wait, what are you talking about? Or like, it's just like less programmed. And and I guess, to what you're saying.
And
like,
they're true questions, you know, like I kind of look at anyone in this space who knows everything. Like, I'm skeptical of you, because either share all that you know, or like, I live in this space surrounded by a million questions. And kind of every issue I've ever covered, I got a million questions. Like, part of me gets a little excited about RFK asking some fundamental questions about fluoride and stuff like that. Then part of me is like, wait, I lived in Newcastle, England for a year. I remember them janky teeth. Like, you know, so like, maybe I would sacrifice to keep that fluoride in my water, you know? And so, like, but I'm all about rehashing all these debates, because governments lie, and they have lied. When it comes to these topics, if someone is like full on believer, I'm like, where's the evidence? Like, show it to your colleagues, because your colleagues haven't seen it. I'm like, they got clearances, you know? And so that's where there's a power to the puzzle, which is like slowly piecing together different lawmakers' perceptions, insights, and findings. And like, again, I don't think I'm gonna like uncover any of the answers on Capitol Hill, but the people who have the power to uncover those answers, hopefully I'm gonna like be a thorn in their arses.
Yeah, that's
regularly.
Ask a thorn.
Right? Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I had one question about, are you familiar with the story of Jake Barber? He was he was this like former military guy turned defense contractor. So he has a story, like he claims to have been involved with crash retrieval programs, and he has a story where he went to the Senate Intelligence to sort of become a source of information and to become a whistleblower and sort of ask for whistleblower protections. But in the conversations with the Senate staffers, like the staffers were asking him for help because in the story, they were feeling threatened or worried for their safety, like within the Senate, and he was sort of said he was disappointed. So has there been any chatter amongst the staffers, or has there been like any sort of spookiness or nervousness of people on the ground working on this stuff? Like, is that something that people chat about on or off the record?
Not much. And kind of the way the Capitol is set up is each lawmaker is their own business and kind of like their own business empire, you know? So you have 535 fiefdoms on Capitol Hill.
LLCs.
Yeah, like they're all just warring fiefdoms. And like, you know, each one has a lot of power. They're federal lawmakers. Like literally the reason we have what's called franked mail is any lawmaker back in the day, it was just they had to sign their name up like that and boom, that was their free stamp. You know, they're federal lawmakers. And so the whole hill is set up for all those staffers to just promote their boss. And so, for the most part, the Hill is set up to keep us reporters away from their staffs. Like, it's not 100% written that way. Like, more so, we interact in the press corps, interact with press secretaries and comms folks. Those folks usually aren't driving policy. Sometimes they are, especially if you have a really media savvy person, like they might be running comms and your brain trust on these issues. But so that's where it's hard, takes time to cultivate sources from staffers, all that. I know, like at Askapol, we have everyone, every shade. We have skeptics who are subscribers. We have people, active military, former military, active intelligence committee, former intelligence committee, active intelligence community, former intelligence community folks. So we got like everyone there. Lawmakers, blah, blah, blah.
Gotta join that
PhDs. And so like, let me put this out here. If you want to find me, I'm on Signal, on WhatsApp. I accept carrier pigeon messages. Also on Proton Mail, Matt Laslo at proton.com. All those encrypted to varying degrees. Whatever platform you trust, you can find me on. And yeah, I will protect your identity 1000%. Like I'm going to my grave with a lot of secrets. And so, yeah, people do reach out and like, we don't advertise it, but you guys, people who subscribe or who follow Askapol, you'll hear when I am asking informed questions, they're informed for a reason. And so like, never going to name my sources. But that information that they give us does come out slowly.
So like how you ask and how you frame
and that's where like I go out of my way to protect those sources, any source, but like especially staffers divulging stuff. But it's interesting. Like for me, the Jake Barber thing never really, and kind of same with the new whistleblower, Matthew Brown.
Right.
No members of Congress are admitting to me. Like I asked a bunch about Jake Barber, and none. I think Burchett was the one who was like, hadn't looked into him, but still decided to speak out of his ass. And he's like, yeah, I just worry that some of these whistleblowers might be plants, So that blew up the internet. But I'm like, did you ever actually go back and listen to Barber's claims? And then like, you have access to skips and all these people in the Pentagon. Like, did you then take his claims and in a classified setting be like, hey, is this bullshit or is there validity here? And so like, that's where again, like half my job is just like
it's like as much like educating as.
But it's literally like, guys, I teach at a master's level, but oh my God, I'm dealing with kindergartners from my day job. And that's where, yeah, it would be nice if more lawmakers had offices or staffs and themselves that were a little more engaged in this. And I think like we kind of had that last Congress. Again, something changed. And it might just be that Trump's back in the White House, so things naturally got very tribalistic very quickly on both sides. Because yeah, with some of these Republicans, they just became like, oh, Trump said the FAA approved all of the stuff up and down the East Coast. Case closed. And I'm like, guys, Secretary Mayorkas had a classified briefing with the New Jersey delegation in like December, where he told Cory Booker and now New Jersey's new senator, Andy Kemp, and others in the delegation, where Mayorkas told them, hey, we have no idea what this stuff is. So for all these like teabaggers, or like Freedom Caucus folks who are the power brokers on the UAP committee, I'm like, hey guys, Mayorkas, remember how y'all tried to impeach him in the last Congress because he's DHS secretary? I'm like, guys, either Trump is right or Mayorkas was lying. So if Mayorkas lied to the entire Jersey delegation, why isn't he coming in for hearings on this FAA thing? And they're just not inquisitive. It's not even on their radar because Trump said this. But I'm like, guys, all you want to do is like hang up this straw man who you've created, who you call Mayorkas, and here's your opportunity. But I'm like, hey, let's also bring in the head of the FAA now and the one who was head back then. Because if you guys do some actual digging, and I've gotten other like Republican lawmakers from New Jersey, Chris Smith in particular, to be like, no, what Trump's saying is bullshit. And he's like, oh, it's not informed. But I'm like, no, no, no. They're fucking lying to us. And like very overtly, when US airspace was just invaded to the degree that shows that the US government is utterly derelict of fucking duty. And for you all from the UAP caucus or secret task force to get all tribalistic with this and just be like, oh, but my president said this. Shut the fuck up. Presidents lie to their own parties. And like you guys took your oath to this thing called the Constitution. And that's what I'm going to remind you of every fucking day, that you're derelict of your most basic duty. You can't even protect U.S. airspace while you enrich all these fucking military industrial complex contracting fucks. Like, they don't need more beamers. We need more sensors over U.S. airspace.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say about that.
Maybe some healthcare would be nice too, but aliens are probably cheaper to detect than healthcare.
Well, dude, this was great. I got bounced.
Yeah, I mean, this is... What's up?
I said we got to do this again sometime.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, we'll definitely be in touch. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day. I know you're always super busy working on all sorts of stuff, so this has been really fantastic. So people can check out your work at askapol.com. You got askapoluaps.com.
Ask a poll, like ask a politician. Askapoluap.com for this issue. Then we also have crypto, drugs, AI. But yeah, like we're only as strong as our supporters, and so like I've been covering Congress 20 years ish. They're like lawmakers are kind of over me on one sense. They enjoy me still, but like when me as a part of the mainstream media goes and asks a question, like there's not much power there. When I bring a question from you all, when I say, hey, one of your constituents is asking this, there's just an instantaneous change in lawmakers. So like as much as it feels like you guys are locked out of this corrupt former democracy or whatever, like lawmakers do listen to you all, and a hell of a lot more than they listen to me. And so that's like the power of Ask a Poll is when our community sends us questions. Because literally, if I'm asking a question from a Florida resident to Marco Rubio, he's going to listen a lot more than Professor Laslo's pontificating about blah, blah, blah.
And yeah, that's really great that you're bringing people together. And I think what you're doing is like so important, especially in this day and age where we're having trouble trusting what's real and what's fake. You're at least helping us all hold our representatives accountable. And that's awesome. So yeah, really great talking to you. I've been a fan for a while, so that's
dude, awesome. Be well.
Yeah, you too. Be well.